Okay, well, I show it's 10 o'clock. Welcome everyone to this webinar on holy listening. My name is Michelle Morris and I work in the Center for Communications. I am the course coordinator for Arkansas. We have an online learning system that allows us to provide free online courses, which has been tremendously useful the past couple of weeks. We will cut this one up and make it into a course that anyone can use. If you want to share this with some of your people in Tennessee and Texas, wherever y'all are from, you're welcome to do that. And you can go to arumc.org. I'll put the address, actually I'll put it in the chat where you'll be able to find this course. Um, we are excited to bring you to this. This is a webinar as opposed to a meeting. If you're used to being on Zoom meetings and you're used to being able to be seen and heard, we cannot see or hear you. If you're still in your pajamas, you're safe. You can be super cozy and comfy and participating in this. Just if you have any questions, I invite you to use the chat function or to use the Q&A function to share your questions. If you just want your question to be seen by the panelists, then you notice in the to line, your default is to all panelists, which is how many of you have been responding at this point. But if you would like your question to be shared with everybody, or if you have a comment to share with everyone, please change that to line to all panelists and attendees by hitting the little down arrow and making that other choice. So we invite you to do that to be participant in this. I am an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, so I'll hop in and share any kind of pastoral perspective that Melinda invites me to be a part of, or if you have questions from the pastoral side, I'm happy to share those. But otherwise, my main role in this is to be the producer, which is the person who watches the chat and makes sure that your questions do get answered. If they don't get answered right away, then just hold on. I've made a note of them, and we're going to come to them at a different point in the topic. So, with that in mind, now that we all understand how this works, hopefully, I'm going to turn it over to Melinda to lead us into this webinar.
Thank you, Michelle. My name is Melinda Shank, and I am your Children's Ministry Coordinator for the state of Arkansas. I work with Dr. Morris and these other two fine, amazing women that you see. The one with the little scarf on her neck, Eva, can you wave? Eva is that works for Hendricks Foundation in the Center for Call. So she works in a college setting, and she does listening stones and holy listening with college students and high school students. And she's also a deaconess in the Methodist Church. And then below is Katie in pink. And Katie is part of your Conference Council of Children's Ministry here. And Katie has been doing ministry with Holy Listening Stones for at least 5 years on a weekly basis. And she does it with her elementary age children. So I asked both of them to come and be part of the panel because they can offer such good insight. So I'm going to click to the next slide. And I'm going to read you a scripture, and then we're going to pray and go on with our learning. In my distress, I cried out to the Lord. I cried out to my God. God heard my voice from his temple. My cry for help reached his ears. 2 Samuel 22:7. So I think of holy listening as we are creating a sacred space, a temple. And today we're learning about a virtual temple or sacred space that we can listen to the cries to God and sit with people during that pain. And so we'll just join me in a quick prayer. Father God, I ask that you bless our time together. Help us to have clear understanding, to be your ears and your heart and your hands as we minister to our families and friends during this time. In your name we pray always. Amen. Okay. So Michelle pointed out to me as I was loading my PowerPoint that some of you might be doing this from your phone or from a very small screen. So you may not be able to read everything that is before you as on the screen, or it might come out small. So I'm going to read it out loud to you, but it's not in a way because you can't read. It's just some people learn better with, oh my gosh, my lights went off. Some people learn better by hearing things, and some people like to read along. So I'm going to give you both that opportunity. So why do we need holy listening? This is an article that was in the Atlantic most recently, and they have just been talking about it. It's hot on everybody's mind right now. And it says, Father Gill said the actual dynamics of how kids absorb this pandemic will follow patterns observed during and after Katrina. Now, we remember Katrina, we're all old enough. According to a 2017 study, Frothgill, kids experience the general atmosphere of anxiety and panic as acutely as adults do, only they might be better at hiding it. The fact might contribute to a general sense among adults that children are somehow naturally resilient and can bounce back easily. And that attitude from adults can hamper both proactive attempts to help children process what's happening and necessary therapeutic efforts after the disaster. So the word resilient has been coming up a lot on the news, in articles that we read, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way. I start to feel a little bit anxious. And when I read this, it explains why that was giving me that anxious feeling, that resilient, because I'm thinking there's a lot of kids that people have grief from their childhoods that as adults they're still not dealing with. So with that being said, can we think about resilient as children are able, and young adults are able to talk and speak their truth and speak their feelings when given the opportunity, so that it doesn't carry on later. So don't think that we don't need to address something because they're resilient, that they're just going to bounce back. But they have the ability, and they haven't learned the fear of holding back emotions and feelings. So let's use Holy Listening Stones as a tool. The next quote I picked is from Scott Berninato, senior editor at the Harvard Business Review 2020. He states, when you name it, you feel it and it moves through you. Emotions need motion. It's important we acknowledge what we go through. Your work is to feel your sadness and fear and anger, whether or not someone else is feeling something. Fighting it doesn't help because your body is producing the feeling. If we allow the feelings to happen, they'll happen in an orderly way. And it empowers us, and then we're not victims. And that, I feel, explains why the resilience, it does. If we do that, we are resilient. If we hide it and push platitudes down and say, don't cry, and we want to remove an uncomfortable situation because we just want the bad feelings to go away, we're not naming it, and we can't start moving through that grief. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is just famous for studying grief, and David Kessler studied with her and picked up where she left off. And there's so much to learn and read about with grief, but I put the little website up there too if you want further. But the big idea is people that Elizabeth and David, Elizabeth did the first 5 stages of grief, and David added the last one with permission from her family after she had died. And I put it on this watercolor blotting in order to kind of stick it in your brain that the stages of grief, when we hear stages, our brain almost thinks, oh, we should go like a ladder, or it should go in order, or it should be linear. But grief is not. And grief comes, overlaps one another. It flows in and out. And so people can be feeling bargaining on one day and anger the next, and back to bargaining on a Wednesday with a little bit of denial on Friday. And all of that is very normal. So it's good when we are meeting with people that we understand that on Monday we had a great conversation, or we did holy listening with them, and they were in a place of just owning that sadness. But Wednesday, when we checked in with them, they were back to anger. That is nothing, that is entirely appropriate. That you should never think, oh my goodness, it didn't work. It's not. You're not there to make it work. You're there to allow them and sit with them into all of those feelings. David Kessler added meaning down there at the bottom. You'll see meaning right there. He added that just most recently in the last year or two. And it was after he lost his own personal son, and he said that he needed some meaning from it. Not that his son died for a reason, but he wanted just like we say, God redeems bad situations. We find redemption. We find something good that came from such a bad situation. So that is usually coming when we've processed a lot more of those stages, but it can come just even in the beginning. It doesn't matter. So there's a lot on grief. Do we have any questions up to this point, Ms. Michelle? Okay. All right, here's the legend herself. This is Reverend Dr. Leanne Hadley. Many of us have met her and worked with her and have learned from her. But if you're jumping on this and this is your first time that you are wondering what I'm talking about, we're just going to do a little introduction in the first couple slides here to let you know what listening stones are and why they are. So for those who can't read their screen, I will read this out loud to you, and those that can, feel free to read it yourself. Leanne Hadley is an elder in the United Methodist Church and is a called minister to children and their families. In 2000, when she was working as a chaplain in a children's hospital, she developed the Holy Listening Stones. She found them a helpful tool when having conversations with children. She designed simple symbols that mean nothing. Get that? They mean nothing until the person who picks them up decides what they mean to them. This is pivotal. She would then ask them why they chose those symbols. The symbols were the conversation starters. She would then listen and hold space for those feelings, ending each time together in prayer before she left to the next room. So I'm going to push, this is from Leanne's website. It is a YouTube video of her showing that you can do holy listening stones with a 4-year-old. She recommends that's probably your youngest, unless you have a very articulate 3-year-old. But holy listening stones would be from 3 to 4-year-olds all the way up to 104-year-olds. A very, very useful tool. So here she is, and you get to hear her sweet voice as she demonstrates her grandson and she.
Hello, I'm Leanne Hadley, and I am here with my grandson, Griffin. Griffin, tell them how old you are. 4. He's 4 years old, and Griffin has never done holy listening stones before. I don't always use holy listening stones with 4-year-olds, so we're going to try it and see what Griffin does with them. So Griffin, these are holy listening stones, and they are stones that help you put your feelings into words and to tell God how you're feeling today, okay? So I want you to look at these stones, and then I want you to pick like 3 of them and tell us how you're feeling today, okay? See what you find. How are you feeling? What did you choose?
I choose
Talk real loud.
trying to get leaves on the tree,
Yeah.
and then having a broken heart
Why do you have a broken heart?
because my friend doesn't want to play with me.
Your friend doesn't want to play with you, and that breaks your heart? I didn't know you had a broken heart. Okay, and what's the circle?
The circle is that someone's riding a race car in the house.
Oh, okay. So this one, he was going to put leaves on the tree. This is a racetrack. He loves cars, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
But this one was interesting because he said that his friend broke his heart because his friend doesn't want to play with him, and that breaks his heart. So he told us something very important about himself. He's only 4, and yet he found one of the stones, at least, that spoke to him. So Griffin, if you were going to do a prayer to God, what would your prayer be? What do you want from God? What do you want to tell God, or what do you need from God? What do you want to say to God today? Okay, what did you want to tell God?
I want to tell God that Jesus died on the cross, and I was standing. There's 2 water gonna go to Jesus and make him wake up.
Okay, so he said that Jesus died on the cross, and that made him very, very sad. And now there's 2 waters, and that water goes somewhere, and it's going to take him to Jesus and make him feel happy again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let me show you one other tool.
No, wait.
What?
And start all over again.
Okay, you want to start all over? Okay. What do you want to do?
Well, is that a happy face?
I don't know. What do you think?
I'm going to be happy.
Okay, so that's a happy face.
And this is a sad
Uh-huh.
face. And I get all
Yeah. Okay, tell us what that means.
that means when you're sad, you see a starfish, and then if you're sad, you want to help each other make a tower. Then that makes you happy.
Very nice. Okay, so you see how they work? They're the language of children. And so whether I understand exactly what he's saying or he just plays with them or whatever, he's becoming familiar with them. And then when he needs them, he can use them. So Griffin, thank you so much for helping us. I want to show my friends one more thing, okay? Let's scoot those out of the way. These are the ones that I usually use with somebody Griffin's age, and they look just like the Holy Listening Stones, except instead of just having random things on them, they're different faces. Like this is a squinchy, sad face. This is a little bit happy. This is a little bit happy. This is like, oh, surprised. Let's see what this one is. Oh, this is very happy. This is very sad. And look at this one, he's crying. So Griffin, out of all of these faces, I want you to tell me, how are you today? How are you right now?
Good.
Can you show me on a face? Oh, he's very happy. Okay. And what about when you think about school? Do you like school? How does school make you feel? How do you feel about school? What's that face mean?
Sad.
Sad? Why don't you like school? Do you like school?
No, I don't want to.
What makes you sad at school? Oh, he's happy at school. Okay. All right, great, Griffin, thank you. So these are Holy Listening Stones, and you can see that even a 4-year-old can use them. He's off and running. So even a 4-year-old can use them, but usually I use them with kindergarten through 6th grade. But I wanted to show you the power of the symbolic language of children. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you'll make some Holy Listening Stones and use them. They are a great tool for you to use with children. So make yourself a set, use them, and just see what happens. I think you will be delightfully surprised. Thank you. God bless you. Oh.
Love the Leanne.
Oh.
Okay. So if you go to her website, she has all of this free for all of you to use. She does not charge anything. She has the symbols up on her website, which at the end of this, you'll have a link to that. If you see, here's all the little symbols that the little buddy was looking at to the right there. Another church took her 5 steps and made a lovely little find a space, light a candle, prepare your stones, ask and listen, and pray together. And I'm going quickly through that because we're going to do that virtually in a little bit together. But before we talk about the virtual, I want to point out our 2 other panelists, Katie and Eva. I have pictures here on the screen of their actual listening stone centers that they have at their church, that they do not in the middle of a crisis, but they do it on a weekly, monthly, as needed basis. So first, I'm going to have Katie go ahead and talk about how you do it with the younger set. And then Eva, your picture to the left there, I want you to talk about how you do it with high school and college students, please.
Great, thank you. We have our Holy Listening Stone set up in our prayer room, and our kids on Wednesday nights from kindergarten to 6th grade, they're divided up into different groups, and they rotate to our prayer room for like a 20-minute rotation. And so we have the Holy Listening Stones in there. We also have several other prayer stations set up. You can see the zippers and the sand, and each station has some instructions that go with it. The Holy Listening Stones are special because, we try to sit on the floor with the kids, and we create that environment where they feel safe and where they can talk to us. And it's just so fascinating to see what they come up with when they choose their own symbol, when they tell you what it means. And something else that we use on Wednesday nights to identify the adults who are trained in the Holy Listening Stones, we made these name tags. And it just says, I'm a holy listener. And so like Miss Kathy would wear one on a Wednesday night. We have a couple of other adults that are trained in that. And so that just identifies the kids and lets them know that I can, if I need to, not even just during the rotation while I'm in the prayer room, if I need to seek out this adult and find them, that there's someone that I can go and talk to and that they're going to listen. And I think one of the most important things that I learned from Leanne Hadley is every time you end a section of, a space of time with a child or with a group of children with the Holy Listening Stones, is to end it by, like she demonstrated, asking what they would like from God or what they would like to tell God. And then I think it's also important to give them a blessing when they leave that time with you, because your job is not to fix the problem or to offer a solution. It really is just to listen and then to release them back into God's care. And so Leanne Hadley loves to give blessings, and she does it with a chapstick. She just makes a sign of the cross on their forehead or on their the back of their hand. You could use a stamp, even a magic marker, just something to remind the kids when they leave that time with you that more than anything, that's what they know and remember, is that they are a blessing.
Melinda, you're muted.
I figured it out. I'm sorry. Katie, do you have students every Wednesday that come? Like, is it the same students? Is it different? Is it sometimes, how does that work?
Well, the same kids rotate each week to our prayer room, but then we also give them a time to just to come out individually if they need to. If something's bothering them at school or in their home, then they just have some extra time throughout the night to come and find a holy listener.
Awesome. All right. So did you take some time at the beginning of each like kind of school year and you kind of teach how to use the listening stones or how to use your prayer room?
Yes,
Or
yes, that's what we do with our volunteers and our leaders. And when I do holy listening stones with a group of kids, like on a Wednesday night, say if we had 7 sitting around a round rug, what I do is just pass the basket of stones and ask them to pick one stone that tells how they're feeling that day. And so that's kind of how I do it with a group of kids. And then we just go around the circle and they share in front of the group, and then of course in front of the leader, what that stone means to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. And Eva, how does this look with high school and college students in your daily, monthly practice?
Yeah, so I'm actually fairly new to putting this into practice with my work. My mom introduced me, my mom's an elder in the North Texas Conference, and her children's pastor on staff, Pastor Caroline, is the person who introduced me to Holy Listening Stones probably 4 or 5 years ago when I was in seminary. And my mom actually gave my husband and I a set as a gift. And so we just sort of had it in our home, and it was something that we used occasionally, but not super often. And then I was coming up with a little devotional for the Arkansas Clergy Women's gathering a couple of weeks ago. This is sort of my first virtual devotion. And I thought the question that kept coming to mind was, how are we really doing? How are we honestly feeling and navigating this experience? And the Holy Listening Stones just popped in my mind. And Caroline, the children's minister I mentioned, she had started using this virtually through her community, particularly for children, but also their families. So I went and I found some little puzzle pieces, which was not ideal. I wanted to find little wooden pieces. And so I drew the images on there. And then I found that I saw some people asking about the animals. That was just an add-on that I did myself. That is not a Leanne Hadley thing, but I just saw them at the store and I thought they were so striking. And I guess there's a cupcake there too, which is not an animal, but I thought those are really speaking to me. Those are conjuring up some feelings and ways that I think we're all being during this time. Maybe some of us are moving at a slower pace like a turtle. Maybe some of us are looking for signs of new life like a butterfly. So I just bought those separately, and then I thought we'll incorporate animals into this too. And so I've started in my weekly check-ins with students, either showing them, this is a station in my home, either showing it to them, or I took a picture of it and then I just share my screen, sort of like what Melinda's doing now on a Zoom call, and just saying, where are you today? What images are standing out for you? And then I haven't yet done it with high school students, but I'm sure that that's coming as well. But college students are going through a lot right now, and I think what's unique for them is that they have left campus communities that feel really safe. For the majority of them, we can't always make assumptions about that either, and they're back in their families' houses, or they're staying with friends or friends' families, and they're sort of experiencing a lot of feelings of being uprooted. And it's easy for me to make assumptions about how they might be feeling about that. So it's been helpful for me to be able to have images and animals to help them identify for themselves where they are and what they're feeling. So that's kind of where the animals come into play. But so far it's really just been about holding that space. And a lot of the work I do is around supporting folks who are discerning a call to ministry. And I think a really important spiritual practice related to that is just saying, where am I? Who am I? How do I handle crisis situations? Or what am I passionate about? What makes me come alive, even in the midst of uncertainty and a whole new reality? So So it's been a real learning experience, and I've also just started using it. My husband and I use it as sort of a spiritual practice to start our days. What image is floating to the top for me as I start my day? So that's been it's just been a really wonderful way to get back into the holy listening practice.
Thank you, Eva, so much.
Yeah.
I do want to point out, if you're looking at these two pictures, Katie has hers with a black permanent marker drawn on actual stones, if you see that. And then what Eva was talking about, she just looks like she got some craft wood disc, and she took a black marker and drew them right on the circles. And then I love the animals choices, because sometimes you do feel like angry, ragey, like a lion or a dinosaur, or I'm feeling a little soft and tender like a deer today. So those would be lovely. Leanne also, when she did the Train the Trainers with Zoom conference a couple weeks ago, had said, if your person that you're meeting with doesn't feel comfortable to with the stones, because it's something new to them, it hasn't been in your daily practice, to ask them to go find something in their house, which is pretty much like you would think a child would go grab one of those stuffed animals, or a teenager would go grab a picture or pulls a picture of something up on his or her phone and show you. So it's perfect. It's the same. It's just a tool to express those feelings. So great, Eva. Thank you.
Melinda, I'll jump in that we did have some questions about why animals and symbols were being used, but I think that you covered that, which is that it doesn't have a predetermined meaning, so it allows the person to bring their own meaning to it, right? Like let's talk about the deer. You said that it was a gentle, peaceful kind of response, but somebody who's maybe had been in a wreck with a deer, right, and hit one of their car, might have interpreted that deer very differently and said, I felt like this was a sort of surprise attack moment, right? Yes. So it's the flexibility of those symbols and animals not carrying a defined reality. You're able to bring your own experience into that space and explain that and share it.
And we're going to see this in some video in a little bit, in a couple slides, but the reason symbols are so valuable, and the reason Leanne found them to be such a gift, is because I'm sure you can think of a time when you've asked somebody, how are you doing? Fine. What's going on? Nothing. And you can't get deeper with them. You can continue to ask questions, but the verbal onto verbal is just not getting you where you need to go. But giving people a choices, open up and break down that barrier. Symbols, putting symbols to feelings, open up that barrier. So that is why the symbols mean nothing. If you didn't want to use Leanne's symbols, you could make up whatever. And actually, if you looked at her video that she gave us, it's not the same symbols that she has on her website. They're different. And the symbols are a tool to open up the feelings. All right, so this was, here's a video clip. She is just precious. And she is teaching parents how to do holy listening stones at home with your family. And she's our transition video from doing it in a ministry church setting to here someone's teaching a group of parents how to do this at home with your children. And then we're going to move into the virtual teleconferencing. So here we go.
Hi friends, Miss Emily here. I'm so excited to share with you today a really awesome prayer practice or a tool that you can use at home with your kids no matter how old they are. This is something that we use quite often in 4th and 5th grade, especially at the Cliff. I've used them for more of a kind of joy and concern, casual sharing time. We also use them at our Sacred Circle time, which is our small group time at the Cliff, where we dive a little bit deeper into scripture together. And so without further ado, I'm excited to share with you a little bit about holy listening stones. So these may or may not look familiar to you, and if they don't, totally okay. If you don't have a baggie of these lying around that maybe your kid took home from VBS a year or two ago, no worries. I am telling you, y'all, these are the easiest things ever to make at home. I actually made some of my own, and I made them out of Post-it notes. So I literally just took some regular old Post-it notes, like these guys, and folded them in half so that the sticky side was on the inside and not sticking everywhere. And then I cut it in half again to make them into little squares. But whatever you have at home, maybe it's just some note cards, a piece of paper, whatever you got, just keep in mind there's 28 of them and you want them to all be able to be laid out and seen easily. So try and keep them about this size, but whatever you have, it works. You also can very easily, I'm going to link a PDF of the symbols so you know which symbols to draw on there, all 28 of them. And if you have a printer available to you, you can just print that PDF out and then cut each listening stone off of that page. That is also another option. So these, like I said, are a really awesome tool to use with kids of any age. They are not as fancy as holy listening sounds. They're really meant to just help guide conversation with children. And quite frankly, they're awesome for adults too. I've used them in conversation and devotionals and meetings with other adults, and they're really awesome. They help kids especially find words that maybe they're struggling to find to tell you, or they just don't quite have or know how to say it, or it can also help them sort through what they're feeling by visually being able to see it. That is really it. There's not a whole bunch of rules around them or fancy things you have to do or anything that you have to have as far as supplies. I'm going to do a little demonstration at the end of this video with you on how we use them at the Cliff and how to use them with the Bible passage, just to give you some kind of structure. But you can use them in a much more casual style. Like maybe you just feel like you want to use them and you sit down on the floor or at a table with your kid and you lay them out and you use them to share. Ask them which stone stands out to them today and why. The only real guidelines or rules to using these in any setting is that these symbols don't mean anything. I mean, they mean what they mean to you and to your kid in the moment when you look at them, but as they are, they don't have any set meaning. So like there's one that looks like a teardrop, but it doesn't have to be a teardrop. There's one, this guy. This doesn't have to be a teardrop or a raindrop, or it doesn't even have to be water or anything specific. Like this doesn't have to be a cloud. They don't have any set meaning on their own. They mean whatever they mean to you in that exact moment when you look at them. And so that is one of the biggest things that I always make sure to tell kids when I use listening stones with them is, as I'm laying them down, I say, these stones don't have any set meaning or specific meaning on their own. They mean whatever they mean to you right now. And that is one of the biggest reminders to tell your kids and for you to remember too when you use them. Because a lot of these are familiar symbols, like a sun. But that's the biggest thing. And then the second thing is to share. So whether you are using these just to kind of help guide conversation and see how they're doing today or what they're feeling, or maybe you're using them like we're going to use at the end of this video in more of a demonstration style, it's important to share. Also, it's important to give them enough time to kind of process what they're feeling and what they're thinking and what they're seeing. So I'm going to do a demonstration to kind of show you how we use them at the Cliff and just give you some guidelines. And you can use this with Bible verses. You can use it just to kind of help guide conversation, however you find it useful to you. But this is a really, really wonderful way to connect with your kid and allow them time to be heard, and time to process and find ways to communicate with you and with themselves and with God, and to really just be seen and heard for where they are right now.
Okay, so I hope that kind of clarified some things. I love that she used little blue sticky notes. That was awesome. That if you're at home right now, that would be exactly something that you would want to do. Please don't go out to the store and grab anything, little wood chips or whatever, and you can print off and cut them out as little circles as you see. So you've heard why we
Melinda,
named
can I
it.
stop for just a second?
Yes, ma'am.
And there were a couple more questions about the symbols. Where do you get the symbols from? And I think that she showed you just draw simple symbols, right? But the other thing is, I know Leanne shared a story when she came and talked to us that the sun, that was the example given there, one little kid thought was a spider instead. And so again, the symbols give that flexibility. Someone asked, how do you help if the kids want the same symbol, or do you work with kids one-on-one? You want to address that?
Well, Katie, you can jump in this too. When we're going to be doing this virtually, you'd be one-on-one with a child, and I'll show you examples of that. But I've done it in a small group with like 5 or 6 kids. And so you can have the child, you take turns, and it depends on how much time. Sometimes I'm like, pick 1 stone, sometimes I'm pick 3. And then if you have a stone in your hand, you're allowed to talk in that sacred circle of time together in a small group, like in a church setting when we're actually able to be together. And then the person holding the stone talks about it and then puts it back, and then another child or student would grab it. But I think to be most effective, the way Katie has it at her church, where it's just kind of a student and adult. And just to note, they're always sitting in a public yet private spot, like in a hallway, in the corner of the room. You're not in a closet with that child or behind any closed doors, obviously for safe sanctuary reasons. But there's a time where you can whisper and be quiet with one another. You can, 2 people can talk in a crowded room and still have an intimate quietness when there's other stuff going on. Katie has a specific room set up as a prayer room where there's lots of prayer stations. So hers looks a little different. And so it is and I usually do it at the end of my class time with my students as a kind of a closing, intimate sharing time with my students when I have a small group of about 15 kids, and we'll break into 2 groups. Does that answer your question? Or it's so flexible. It can be used one-on-one and in a small group and in a prayer room. Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, so we're going to move on to making this virtual. So 2 weeks ago when Leanne had the Zoom, she was like, y'all, grief is coming. People have grief from being isolated, but communities are going to start losing people, and we are not able to get together to mourn. We're not able to have funerals as we once did. As ministers and children workers, child and youth workers, we're not able to go to the houses of those people who are in mourning and sit with them and hold place with them. How are we going to do this? And she said, holy listening, this is the time, and we can make it go virtual so easily. And so I want to so many of us have Droids and iPhones, and there's Zoom conferences. Zoom conference can totally do that. It is free. It's what we're doing now. You can have 40 minutes of free time, which would be very appropriate amount of time or less. Actually, it usually takes about 6 minutes with an elementary student. An adult or a college student, I would think, they may elaborate a little further, so you might get a 20 to 40 minute conversation out of them. But if you look up here on the screen, I have just screenshots. There's Skype for iPhone, so please do not assume that a person has the same exact phone that you have. So you obviously would want to send a text or do a little phone call with, if they're an elementary child, you would call their parent and say, hey, I know your family's experienced some grief right now. I would love a chance to talk with your your child, would you mind letting me do a video chat with them and then just talk? And they might not know what that is, and they might know exactly what that is because you are like Katie and you've been doing it in your ministry. So they're like, oh yeah, we totally need to do some holy listening right now. Or they might be like, I'm not sure. And so then you explain quickly what holy listening is and that you're going to use some symbols to get them to share some feelings with you. So you ask, well, what avenue would be best to connect with you on? So there's Skype for iPhone, there's Google Duo, and there's Just Talk, Video Chat, and Messenger. I've not used the Just Talk one, but the Google Duo, the sample I'm going to show you here in a little bit is on Google Duo because the parent had a Droid. And then there's Skype for iPhone for Droid to Droid. And then if you know they have an iPhone, you can FaceTime them quite easily and quickly with that as well. So those are just the top 3 that you just want to be very aware that you need to have that before you start that time. It's also before a virtual holy listening time is be set up and have your sticky notes, have your little stones that you made, have your cutout symbols laid out, have a candle laid out. With little ones, sometimes we use the little turn on, light on candles. I'm sure Katie and I do that. Eva would obviously use a flame. And I use a flame with my upper elementary kids. And we talk about that this is, you only would light this with a grown up here. So we make sure. The video that I'm going to have you watch here that I video recorded on my phone is done with a 4th grader. There will be no sound, and that's more for confidentiality, as well as I really want you to watch her face. And I'll talk you through some of it what we're doing. But watch how I flip the camera around. Watch how I focus on the stones. I put the camera. So the difference when you're not sitting side by side with them is you need to make those symbols be in the forefront. They can hear your voice. You don't need to be on the screen. You want those symbols on the screen. When they're thinking about something, you want to be showing the flame burning as a centering. And we talk about when we light the candle, we say God is present with us. The flame represents the Spirit of God in this conversation and in this holy sacred time that we're having together by the phone. So watch my camera angles and watch what I do. This child is sweetest child. But so you're just, when you melt, when you see her sweet little face. So there I am down in the corner, and I'm just doing a greeting with her and telling her, I just haven't seen you for so long, and I wanted to check in, and I would love to do some holy listening stones. So I'm showing her, and look how she leans in and she focuses on the stones. And then I ask her, oh, the candle's not lit. What do we need to do? And she talks me through it. And then I asked her, what does it mean when we light our candle? Now you'll see her looking over to her left. Her mom chose to stay in the room, which I highly recommend. And if the parent doesn't want to, have the child sit in a living room or sit in an open space while you're FaceTiming or chatting with them. But it was sweet. Her mom got to listen and hear things that she didn't know. So there she's concentrating. Look at her little concentrating face, but she's not seeing my face. She's looking at those stones. And a few times I would talk and point to a symbol, but I really tried to stay quiet so her mind could think. Watch, her eyes just got a little bigger. She's concentrating. And notice how the background of the stones, I just put a little fabric down so that we don't want anything with pattern, anything to be too busy in order while they're trying to pick out their stones. Just a little technicality, but you want to make it as special as you can. And so she picked her 3 stones. And the 3 stones that she picked, one was the sun. And she picked the sun because she got to go outside because they got a new trampoline. And she had a really fun time with her sister. So then I just focused on the 3 stones. Do you see how we're doing that? Again, it's not about me. It's about her, and it's about what she's seen in those symbols. And so look, she did a little look up. When someone looks up, they're doing a memory, and oh, sweetness. And she's thinking back about jumping on the trampoline with her sister. And so that's what she was telling me about. And so I moved that one away because she shared. And now she's looking at the swirl. And in the swirl one, she's telling me that everything just seems really messy right now. And I picked a swirl because things are not as they normally are. And it's confusing right now. And that swirl means confusing is what she's sharing with me. And then she goes on and she picks the excited mark. Yeah. And she picks the excited mark because she's still on the feeling of the pandemic and the worry and the fears, and it makes her feel anxious and excited. And so that's why she picked the excited mark. And so she's able to share. She's still looking at the stone. It allows her that easy time. She can hear my voice completely with the chat. So then the video goes on, and I asked her, I said, Sid, would you like to pray for these things, or would you like me to pray for them? And she said, I would like you to pray, Miss Melinda. And so I said, okay, the Lord be with you. And she said, and also with you, because she knows that's our practice that we do together. And then we pray. And then I thank her for our time and her sharing. And she blows out, and we blow out the candle. Okay. Panelists, do you have anything to add to this video chatting? Right, this little sample here with her? If you're talking, you're on mute. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. All right, so holy listening structure via the camera phone. So you're going to greet the person and you're going to ask them if they would prefer to find 2 things in their house that would represent. So this is a lot just like what Eva did. Instead of using stones, she used some other object. So if they're not familiar with the stone, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'll hang up and we're going to get back together again, and you pick 2 or 3 things that are a symbol of what you're feeling right now, that give me a picture instead of using the words. And once they've made, or you can say, do you want to use the stones? Once they've made a choice, you light the candle, reminding the Spirit of God. Have this all set up before you go. Don't make them sit there and watch you dump stones and organize them. You want this to be efficient. The video chat that I just showed you took 6 minutes. And her mom called me afterwards, thanking me and saying that was so special to her and to her mom. And her mom learned so much, didn't know her daughter was feeling all those feelings. So the second part, the middle part of a holy listening structure is give them time to pick 3 stones. You pick up the stone and they choose, and you you separate them out so it's easily to be seen. Give your your camera phone to be focused on the stone or the symbol that they are looking at, and ask them to explain to you why they chose each one. Listen and acknowledge. Very important here. You are not there to offer advice or tell your own story. It can be hard even if they ask. and press for an answer to fix the problem. You can reply something like this: I acknowledge your feelings are true and real. Our time together is for you to take the healing steps to naming your feelings and together lifting them in prayer. Our time together is not for me to give you answers. This is a very important, it's very hard. We want to say, oh, and this happened. And please refrain from sharing. This is where the Stevens ministry part comes in, and you are a listener and holding space for them, and you don't have to have the answers. And so when we don't have to have the answers, it also takes the fear out of doing this, because as long as you do these 3 steps, you're never going to get a too big of fear, a too much grief, because you don't have to have the answers for that grief. You just have to listen to them and acknowledge them. So the closing is ask if they would like to pray. So I always give that option. You would be surprised. I know you probably think everybody be like, oh no, you, Miss Melinda, you pray. But you know what? There are some kids that will just blow you out of the water. Katie, do you want to speak to that?
That is one of my favorite things to do, is ask who wants to say a prayer for us tonight. And I am usually blown away by the depth and the spirituality that they, demonstrate. Mm-hmm.
It is. And sometimes I feel like, oh, that was my blessing. That was my, that was how God just blessed me in this experience. Like, I'm here for this person, but I blessed because that child just shared information and prayed in a way that was so genuine and real and heartfelt, brought tears to my eyes, and I'd have to choke them back so that I kept composure. So you always want to offer them that opportunity to pray, and if not, then you will close in a prayer and you offer a blessing. And it's not as fun because we don't have our blessing balm that we made with Leanne, but you can do that. The Lord bless you. You can put the sign of the cross on the screen to them, and then the next is, and you thank them for your time and releasing that grief to God for the holy listener, because I think I probably can safely say that Eva and Katie, if you are doing this on a weekend basis, or a weekday basis, you're not going to get as heavy. Sometimes you get some heavy things, but you're not going to get as heavy. Now, when we're doing it in a virtual sense, in a time of crisis, where big losses and isolation, you are going to start as the caregiver to feel everyone's grief. And the point of this is not to carry around and absorb every person that you listen to's grief. And so we want to release that to God. And so for me, on the last video, you'll see I pick up a candle and I physically blow it out. And for me, that exhaling at the end is me just giving that back to the Spirit of God, that I cannot take this with me, and I'm giving that back. Another way of releasing is to write those prayers down. And some people, like when you're sitting on stuff at night and you can't sleep, you get up and you write it down to get it out of your brain. The same goes if you, but don't put the person's name in your prayer journal, but just write down that prayer. So you're like, and I'm giving it to God. It's in my prayer journal. I might revisit it in my personal prayers, but I'm not going to carry this grief around with me. And this is very important. And I'm going to have Dr. Morris. She is our elder pastor, and they are trained you can't carry around your congregation's grief. When you do, you could possibly do 3 funerals in a week as just a regular pastor, not in a time of crisis. So Michelle, do you have any other ways that as ministers to people that we can release that grief?
Yeah, first of all, especially in a time like this when we're all experiencing grief, it's going to be very difficult not to, let your own grief overwhelm a space like this, but also to not let it stack on top of all of the grief that you have. And I'll be honest, my pastoral colleagues and I are really struggling with the amount of grief that is out there right now. Um, and that we are compounded with as well. So first of all, I would say you need your own holy listener too.
Yes.
You need somebody that you can go to, and maybe you can pair up with someone. Maybe you can pair with another children's minister, or say, hey, how about once a week we do holy listening together.
Excellent.
I
Yes.
listen to you, you listen to me, and again, maintain confidentiality of folks, but you need a space where you can go and release that grief as well. And then I mean, we say give it to God. And that's obviously the best answer, but that's hard to do sometimes when you've got really people right in front of you that you love, that you know are suffering. I encourage you to do that as much as you can, but also cut yourself a little slack. We are all human and not necessarily we're not super people, right? We're not Jesus. We can't carry the world's sins on our shoulders. We can't carry the world's grief on our shoulders all the time. So I have sometimes what I call, not necessarily the most healthy answer, but I have Oreo cookies for dinner days in ministry, where I just do something that makes me feel a little better and lets me kind of celebrate what is good and fun and beautiful and sweet in the world, and remind myself of those things. If it's taking a walk and acknowledging, I remember I was struggling with postpartum depression, and I said one of the things that was helping me get through that was taking my son for a walk, because he saw what was magical about rocks and leaves. And it suddenly made the world beautiful for me again. So find those little ways of finding what's beautiful and powerful and meaningful in those spaces. And maybe it's those blessings that you get in the prayers, but maybe it's the other things that you do intentionally to heal your soul.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Morris. The last video is my daughter shot for me over my shoulder, so you could kind of see what it looked like behind the scenes, another angle of virtual holy listening. And the other person on the line is my son. He's 17 years old, and he's done listening stones since he was way little. And but he said, I will do this for you, but I'm not doing it for real, because it's so intimate. And he was like, I'm not sharing for real stuff with all of with the whole state of Arkansas, and now outside the state of Arkansas. So what his is, I just had him do, Leanne gave us the example that she had done with a student. It was a teenage boy, and his dad was a healthcare worker, and he had anger because of it. And so we kind of scripted this a teensy bit, just so you could kind of see. But notice his response is a very typical teenage boy's response. And notice how I'm not forceful with him, but I continue to give him choices. And then he goes ahead and chooses one. And you're going to find that when working with teenagers, they want to choose it once they want it. It needs to be on their terms. The one thing we did learn with this, he was getting some feedback. So have somebody turn their volume down when talking, or have each of you have headphones on so we don't get the feedback. So that is I went ahead and used that video so that you could see that does happen when we're doing virtual. So if you find that you're getting a lot of feedback, have both holy listener and the care receiver to have the headphones on, so that feedback doesn't happen when we talk. It's kind of an echo. So we'll watch this, and then what we have is our closing questions for panel and resources. So this is just a couple minutes here. The beginning is most important.
Hey, Braid.
I just wanted to reach out to you. Your mom had messaged me and said that you weren't feeling super good, so I wanted to do a little FaceTime with you and chat. What's going on?
Nothing, I'm fine.
Really, your voice doesn't sound fine, and it's definitely been a lot going on lately. Is there a, hey, do you want to do Holy Listening Stones? Remember, we've done that before. Would that help?
No.
Okay, well, do you want to go around your house and find something that might describe what you're feeling? Like, look through your stuff and find something?
No, I don't want to get up. I'll do the stones.
Okay. All right,
just said,
so
I don't
let
want
me,
to get up. I'll do them.
flip this around. And I know it's been a while since you've done this, but before we get going, we always light a candle, remember? And do you remember why we light a candle?
No.
To remind us that God is present, that God's Holy Spirit is present. So we've got a candle lit. And then I'm going to shine over or put the camera over the stone pictures, and you just take your time.
So if you're not familiar with this, you can hit the reverse
and remember,
screen,
the symbols
flip
can
your
be
screen around.
anything you want them to be. So I want you to look all over them and see if any of those symbols would describe or give a picture clue to what you're feeling. So now that you've looked at all, can you pick 3 of them that might be an image that represents how you're feeling?
The question mark.
Okay, let me find that. Okay, question mark. Okay.
And the X.
The X. Okay.
And I can't see them. Can you
Yep.
zoom in? Probably the foot.
Okay. All right, so we have the question mark, the X, and the foot. Which one would you gonna tell me about first? Why did you pick one of them? Do you wanna, why'd you pick the foot?
I picked the foot because I've been kind of lonely and I kind of want to get out and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the coronavirus and all that. And it just is like symbolizes like moving and stuff. So that's what it made me feel like.
Excellent, good choice. That's totally valid. I think so many of us could agree to pick that one. Okay, how about that X? Or is it an X or is it a T or what is that?
It's an X, I think.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to you? Why did you want to pick that one?
Well, it's because my dad, he's a nurse at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many like bad things going on, and I'm kind of scared that he's gonna get sick or that people are gonna get sick and die.
So that's kind of like that you're X'd out kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Valid. That is a very real feeling there, Brady. I'm sorry. And what about the question mark?
Well, I've been seeing a lot of my friends on Instagram and Facebook. They're like getting like into big gatherings and stuff and not using their like staying away from each other.
Mm-hmm. They're not social distancing.
Yeah, it just makes me question like if they care about what's happening.
Oh, you are right. That is a struggle. I'm so sorry. Those are definitely valid feelings. That's definitely something to be upset about. So, Ray, can we just take all these valid concerns and just pray about them really quick? And then, okay. Would you like to pray or would you like me to pray?
You can pray.
Okay. All right.
Normal
Father
teenager.
God, thank you for Brady, and thank you for his valid concerns. Father, help him to find ways to venture out and walk and be safe at the same time. Father God, give his dad protection as he works as an essential worker. And Father, help his friends to social distance and help Brady to be a good example of social distancing. God, we are in trials and times of hardness right now.
You can hear the feedback.
And I ask your help for all of us, but mostly for Brady and his feelings. In your name we pray always. Amen. All right, Braid. Oh, you know what? I was wondering as we were talking, I'm kind of hearing some voices. So the next time we FaceTime together, I'm going to have you turn your volume down. Or is it my volume or yours? We're getting some feedback. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, because I'm getting a little feedback, but maybe it's my phone. Okay, so I'm going to blow the candle out. Okay. And Brady, just know that I'm here for you whenever, and I'm going to check back with you in a couple days, and we'll do this again, and you can let me know how you're feeling with your friends and seeing them on Instagram. Okay? All right. Take care. Bye.
Okay, an important aspect with the teens especially is that you have the ability to check easily, send a little text, share a little, let them know later on, a couple days later, that you're thinking about them. Now, people with large churches, this is going to be much harder. So this is why I would love, and hopefully you share this webinar, because the more people you have trained, the more people can do this. This does not mean that only the pastor, the youth director, the deacon, and the children's minister are the only people that can do holy listening. Holy listening is for anyone. In fact, I think Katie has several volunteers that are not on staff at church. Is that correct? You have college students that are trained.
Yes.
Yeah. So get as many people trained as possible. It is very simple. Stress the beginning, middle, and end stages. And remember, you're just listening and holding space and lifting it up in prayer. So we're going to move to our last slide. And questions for any of us, Michelle will shoot those out to us. Otherwise, I have some, of course, Leanne Hadley's Holy Listening Stones. You can go to that link quickly and download for free all the symbols, cut them out, glue them on, whatever you want, or use them as paper. Her Time for Children Facebook page, Leanne Hadley's Facebook page, she posts often wonderful video segments and great advice. So I would follow her. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler's, we talked about that earlier. So if you want to learn more about the grief process, I love and just listen to the Bible for Normal People. Just had Allison Cook, PhD, on, and she is a therapist who talks about where we're at and where we're feeling with our grief right now, and where our spirituality and mental health are like entwined. And so why is that important right now, and why is that important always? So it's a great podcast. And then Brene Brown, love the sister Brene, and Brene just interviewed David Kessler in her third dropping of her podcast. So I put that little link. So if you want to actually hear David Kessler talk about the stages of grief and share it, that's an excellent podcast to listen to. And then Leanne's book, Touching Heaven, and she wrote that book when working in the Children's Hospital. So with that said, I appreciate your time, and our panel is completely open for any questions or clarifications. Michelle?
So far, I think everybody's asked what they had, but we'll give it another minute or so in case somebody's typing. I want to thank you all for being here today and for sharing this information and this practice. I was just sitting here thinking of the people that I would like to you know, like I had said, everybody needs their own holy listener. I thought, I think I know who my holy listener is going to be. So I encourage you all to put this into practice as well. So any other questions in the chat? Anyone want to share anything? We're getting a lot of thank yous for y'all. Some folks had to hop off because they had another commitment, but we'll see. Just another minute here. There's a question of, should we give credit to Leanne when we use this idea?
Well, I think if you taught it to somebody else, if you're teaching it to somebody else, you would say, this is not my invention. This is not Melinda's. This is not Katie's. This is not Eva's. This is Leanne Hadley. Like if you were teaching, you would give acknowledgments to, but not when you're doing it with a child or another adult or a teen. It's your tool to use. And that's why she has it free. And that's why she did a train the trainer. She knows she can't do this all, but she knows how important it is. And she has, there's hospitals all around, children's hospitals all around the country that use this because she's taught it to the caregivers at the hospitals and the chaplains at the hospitals as well. So just if you would never say this is my idea, but like when you were teaching it to somebody, but you would, just like I did today, this is Leanne's amazing idea. We should totally use this. It's credit where credit is due, and she definitely deserves the credit for this. But she wants everybody to be using it because it's such a gift. You'll get nuggets of truth from people, and they'll be like, I don't know why I feel so good, but I just feel so good right now. And it's teaching people how to speak their truth and say their pain and not be scared of it and not bury that. And that's the worst thing we can do, is to not speak that pain. Anything else?
No, I think that covers it. So again, thanks to everyone for being here, for being present. There's lots of thanks to y'all for coming into the chat. And we do encourage you to share this. I do remind you, we will actually cut this, load it onto YouTube within 24 hours so you can see the full thing up on YouTube at the Arkansas Conference of the United Methodist Church YouTube page. And then, like I mentioned and shared the address in the chat, we will cut it up as a course that kind of takes people step by step through this. So please share this resource. It's available for anyone to use. We just want folks to have access to this at this time. So.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So I feel like I have to say this: go in peace and serve the Lord, my friends. Go in peace and serve.
Amen. Amen. Thank you all for being with us.